Good morning, Mr. Boccuzzi. How are you doing?
Hey, good morning, Mr. Westfield. How are you?
Doing great, doing great. Hey, we had fall here in Texas for like a day last week. It was like in the 40s and 50s overnight, and now it's back in like the 80s overnight. So we have an Indian summer for sure. How about you guys up north?
Oh, we are loving life up here right now. The leaves are changing in New England. It's one of the prettiest times of the year. I think anywhere in the country. Absolutely beautiful right now. Nice 50-degree temperatures at
Oh,
nighttime,
wow.
70
I'm
degrees
jealous.
during the day.
I'm jealous. I'm jealous. Well, hey, we have a great show lined up today. Can you believe it's episode 14?
Episode 14, and you're right, it is going to be a great show. We've got Dinesh Patel from Novartis, and I can't even believe, you think about some of these pharmaceutical companies, they have 14 $1 billion products, solutions, 14
Wow.
of them.
Wow.
So what an incredible firm, 110,000 employees across the world, big organization. So obviously our topic of quality in software development is going to be critical, right?
Absolutely. In fact, let's bring him on. So Dinesh heads up software and quality assurance for Novartis, which is one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. And good morning, Dinesh. Thank you for being on the show today.
Good morning, John and John. How are you guys doing?
Great.
Doing
Everything
well.
going all right up in New Jersey? John was just telling me how nice the weather is up in the Northeast.
Yeah, you can't go wrong with this weather. I'll take it any day.
Versus our 85 degree, it's going to be 85 degrees here in Dallas today. But
Oh wow!
no, hey, so JB and I were just talking right before you joined. Just how interesting your industry has to be right now, and it's really critical if you think about it. Time to market is the number one priority, right? And so it makes your role from a testing and quality assurance perspective super critical inside the organization, because the faster that you all can get things done, right, the faster things can get out to market. And that could be a huge differentiator between you guys and your competition, is right?
Absolutely. I mean, we witnessed in last 2-3 years with the pandemic, right? Whether it be any vaccine or medicine, or you talk about software, it's all about time to market, getting this things out there right on time before your competitor. So you hit it, right?
And I'm assuming that there's a couple tools and things like that. I mean, these days I know that there's a lot of automation in the space, and I was wondering if you can sort of enlighten us a little bit about, what your thoughts are and perspectives on automation and how that's really changed the game from a QA perspective, right?
Yeah. So if I remember correctly, when I started my career, that's when, we were all more process oriented. We didn't even think about, getting things out on time. If we needed, we could delay the release and so on. But now it's all about time to market, getting things out earlier. So automation, how fast we can test it, fix it if we find any issues, and get it out the door. So if you talk about tools, there are plenty of open source tools out there. There are plenty of other vendors and licensed tools out there, depending on what you're testing. So whether it's UI, backend, database. Right now, currently, world is going toward all about data. Content is king. So we are focused around mostly on data, whether it's data quality, data analytics, data engineering, and all that. So from my experience perspective, UI side, we use Selenium and Test Complete. From backend perspective, we have a lot of other tools, but then from data right now, we are using Query Search, and then we have some Python Autobot type of framework that we built homegrown. So those are the few to name, but there are plenty of tools out there.
Great. And, Dinesh, when you think about the QA, again, I remember doing development 20 years ago, and again, there was tools out there, but not automated. What do you think about separating kind of service providers that are doing the work for you, and then separating QA and testing and utilizing someone that's kind of a third-party group? Is there a benefit to that, and why? If so, why?
Yeah, so it's a very interesting topic, and I've been going through all of that in each of the companies individually. They all have their own different ways, but the common mindset is you don't want to have a same team or same vendor or same people to build and then test it, right? Because a QA is an art, right? It's kind of a different mindset. One is kind of a building versus one is breaking. So I'll give you an analogy of my two kids, right? One is a boy and one is girl. Both of them likes to play with Legos, but the boy is like, he goes online and finds some pictures and then start putting things together. It kind of building mindset. He just want to build something, make it look good, and then he went versus his sister comes in and she just literally touched there. Hey Pritu, what happened if you touch here? And the whole thing collapsed, right? So but it's interesting mindset that one is just like, I just want to build it. It's like a developer mindset, versus other one is like, you just touching it, but it didn't even survive like 5 seconds. It's like a different mindset that you have to think about how you break it, how people gonna use it, how end users gonna leverage this product or software that you're building it. So the common thinking I have is like, having two separate individual doing independent role. One is a developer versus QA. Nothing wrong against each other, but having independent QA is a key aspect. And that's why I bring independent service provider, whether to do the assessment, testing, or automation.
Oh, wow.
That's really interesting. And it's interesting, too, is that when you were at Broadridge, you utilized a third-party Signity, which many of us are familiar with. And now at Novartis, you're utilizing Signity again. Are there things that you find specialties inside of certain service providers like a Signity that are beneficial, or is it their curiosity around breaking, kind of like your daughter, which I love that example? What makes Signity special?
So it's a two aspect. Obviously, Signity is specialized service provider when it comes to QA, testing, automation, and all that, right? So that's one thing. And then other is when I joined Broadridge, and same thing here at Novartis in June. The QA element is being done either internally, employees, or we have different vendors doing it. So it's always interesting to bring somebody who does not have kind of a interest or unbiased opinion, right? So that's why I kind of brought in independent team, which is Signity, right? Number one, they know what they're doing, especially from my background. I did a little bit of a research before I engaged with Signity at Broadridge and here at Novartis as well, is that, I just want to see somebody who knows what they're doing about, whether it comes to just manual testing, automations. Over there, we had a lot of software, versus over here, we have a lot of data, right? We're bringing data from 40 different sources, and we're going to the transformation dashboards and all that. So in that stand, Signity is kind of standing out compared to their competitor. They know, and also when talking to different teams who are currently doing this, not only just knowing how to do it, but also trying to find out what's happening. So what I wanted to do is first go in there, have a current land of the lay, what's happening, how teams are doing it, whether it be process, best practice, framework, automation, or just getting things done, right? On the name of all of that, I just wanted to have a gaze, what's happening currently, understand from there what is happening good, what are the gaps, and from there, then we can come up with a roadmap to kind of pick top 3, top 5 priorities and then attack that. So that's the mindset. But yeah, Signity does well when it comes to testing, QA, automations, audit, assessment, all those stuff. So,
and it's a lot more than just the people, and the people there are great. The processes are great. The methodologies they use, but they really have a heavy focus on relationships, which I think is key in your business, right?
Absolutely. It's one of the training I took in my early days management, where they talk about R&R, right? Building a relationship and reputation. So it's not about how you do it, what do you do it. I mean, eventually everybody get things done, right? But it's about having this long-term impact, the mindset of doing things the right way, R&R concept, that I found very well with Signity.
I have a question. When you think about testing, I always think about things like, testing to see if you can, to your point, break it. But what about optimization? So like, does a third-party tester for Q&A also look at things if you're moving data to the cloud to figure out maybe which would be the most effective up in the cloud, or which clouds, or which would you stay local on servers? I mean, are they helping with that kind of testing as well, or is it just focus on the breakage, not as much on optimization?
No, when I say QA, it's not only just the break the things and get the testing done according to requirement and specification, right? It's always, and that's another benefit or a good thing about Signity that I like about it is thinking outside the box, right? What are the non-functional requirements? What are the things that we need to think about? It's when it comes to testing, it's two things, right? One, people usually focus and get bogged down during the build while you're doing the development, testing, UAT, or getting pre-production ready, right? That's where heavy duty focus, everybody has it. But what happened after you go to production? What happened after you go live, right? How are we going to be able to sustain it if we have to scale it up, or God forbid, if we have to scale it down? And all those aspects is where we need good mindset, good QA thinking, right? So that's where Signity or anybody, when you decide to pick your team or build your team, we need to have that aspect of a non-functional testing as well as how users gonna use it. So I put it like a triangle, right? Obviously on a base, you have to build your product or software based on the requirement specification, but then think about how you can do scaling, non-functional testing, all that. And then you have to also keep it in mind how to quickly react. Your users are using it, your competitors coming up with the products and things like that. So those are the two other key elements that undervalued, but we have to going forward when you go into cloud, because there are so many providers and they all, when it comes to doing the things, they all do give or take right way. But what works for you, it's like everybody has a specific need, and that's what you have to decide it. Like, so first question is, like, usually we get bogged down into how to do it. To me, that's later. First you have to figure it out, like ask 7 times, what is it that we're trying to do? What is it we're trying to fix it? Or what is broken that we need to kind of repair it or build something new? 7 times, then you get that what you need. From there, then you figure out what tools you need, what cloud solution, what providers, and all that.
Yeah, I think it's a pretty complex thing, right? I mean, John, you bring up an excellent point, and that is, in today's what I call multi-hybrid cloud environment,
Right.
you've got people operating legacy systems, and some of them are going to continue to operate legacy systems. They also have things that are moved out to different hyperscalers. They've done some, native cloud development, whatever. So you've got this hybrid environment. And it's not just about does the software work, it's does it work in that environment. And oh, by the way, you have things like latency, where the database is located and things like that. So the code may be perfect code, but it could be that the database is too far away from something that's processing it, right? And at the end of the day, it fails because of that. So it could be an architectural issue that actually causes the issue, not a software coding fail. Correct, Dinesh?
Yes, it's architectural also. It's a very good point, Join. And there's also other aspect that I would like to touch on is like which way to go is also there are a lot of like, so in pharmaceutical, financial, there are a lot of regulations, right? And they also unique to specific region or country. So I remember in my old days, I think it was Morgan Stanley, where if you're dealing with certain piece of code, whether in Europe, even within Europe, whether UK versus other countries, or say in Asia, like China, right? You have specific regulation, local regulation. So at that time, you have to kind of figure out whether one solution will work, or you have to go with something that also works with the local solution. So to answer, John, your question earlier, it is part of a QA having a seat on the table when you're deciding which route to go, which solution, which architect, or which whether to go hybrid route, having completely on cloud, or having on-prem solutions. It all depends on first going asking question, what is it that we need to do? Because there could be regulatory aspect that you can't go on cloud.
Yeah. That's. I think this is getting into something really interesting that I wasn't even thinking about. Was where do you bring Q&A? Where do you bring Signity? When do you invite them to the table? And it's such an interesting idea here because they're agnostic. I always think about like AWS. It's like a chiropractor. Their solution to everything is move it to the cloud, just like a chiropractor. Their solution is, hey, we're going to crack your back. It's going to feel better. A surgeon, they're going to say, hey, it's surgery that's going to fix your back. So you've got to have somebody at the table that is thinking holistically, and it doesn't have skin in the game with regards to, what solutions we're going to use. So when do you bring a Signity into the conversation? How soon?
So my answer is day zero, right? I mean, in old days, QA used to come on a table in my early career, like after the product is ready to almost go to the production and then say, okay, let's run it to the specification, do the testing, put the check mark and go live, right? That has changed now to answer a couple of points, right? Whether time to market or providing the right feedback or even selecting the right tools and technology. So nowadays, we always want to be on the table on day zero when you're discussing about, before even you start thinking about architect and design, like what is a solution, what is that user want, what is the requirement, what is asked. So when they're talking about that to the business people, right there, QA guys are there, listening, providing right feedback. So from there, number one, we are on a table, listening what's happening, so we can then always, instead of reacting, proactively preparing from a QA perspective, non-functional testing perspective, scaling, all that, security. But besides that, we're also providing the feedback that no, instead of going or selecting this vendor versus this tools, this might work better down the road when it comes to whether performance or regional load balancing or whatever it is, right?
So let me ask the question. That brings up another good point, and it's really interesting topics, I believe. And I'm so glad we have you on the show to talk about this. So let's talk about what I call shelf life of a software product as it sits out in the ecosystem. For example, in your ecosystem, right? So in every industry, it's really important when they make things that they think about the longevity of those things, that those things can, last for more than just a couple of months, so that as things change around them in the environment, that they can still persevere, right? So from a QA and testing perspective, do you all test for that as well? In other words, it's not just will it work today, but are you also putting into production something that's going to withstand changes, minor as they could be or major as they could be, over the next couple of years? So you don't have to sort of reinvent everything every couple of years as architecture changes and technology changes and things like that happen.
Absolutely. So that's the part of, I mentioned the triangle, right? So the third element is like where users are. Say, I'll give you a simple example. Like everybody use Google Chrome or any browser per se, right? And most of the applications in my early days were running on a browser. Now, without even knowing, say, a trader is using one of the trading applications that we built on browser, and without us knowing, IT upgraded one of the browser, right? Say Chrome or IE came up with the new version or security patch. They updated it, and then God forbid, for whatever reason, the application didn't connect to the backend or database, things like that. It's a very simplified example, but to touch your point, you have to anticipate those things, like what happened if something changed, or so that's from unanticipated changes. Also, you have to think about how the pattern or user is going to change, right? They want to change their behavior or their expectation. So that another element that QA has to keep it in mind is keep monitoring in production, bring the 360 loop back, feedback, how it's being used, how people are changing their behavior, the patterns, look into logs, error, exception, whatever, and then adjust it as you need to, provide the feedback back to the development team, and kind of fix it as it happens, or proactively anticipate to fix it.
So what you're saying is there is thought up front about not just will it work today, but the longevity of the product that you're putting out there, right? From an application
Absolutely, you have to think about it. It's like, otherwise, it's worked today. It's like that saying we have, like it works, like, in old days, the developer used to say, oh, it worked on my computer, but it doesn't work in QA, right? Now, same concept. So you have to anticipate, think about it, how it will be used in productions, how it will change in future, and plan for that. It's more like a non-specific requirement. What I call is a non-functional testing, but that comes with experience and specialty. That's where some of the good partners like Signity would come and help us.
Yeah, Dinesh, I think that's interesting that you and John are talking about this. Is, it really also I think about this as 10 or 15 years ago, it was building technology. An SAP implementation was 5 years. It could be longer. And today it's such an agile world the agility of technology and solutions requires testing in that 365 circle, because you're constantly, when would you ever stop testing, right?
Yeah, and that's where the CI/CD concept comes in, right? And I think I mentioned in earlier conversation with somebody that you have to kind of anticipate. Like, so the analogy I gave is like, Boy Scout or Girl Scouts versus the soldier, right? So one is like, scouting mechanism is like you always being kind of flexible, forcing, trying to adjust the situation, being innovative, what's going to happen, and then react to it proactively, versus soldiers have the job, right? You just either protecting a territory, whether it's regulations or testing some specific requirements or whatever it is. But it's about striking right balance. You don't want to get carried away too left or too right, and then predict it properly. So then you have a time to market, right mindset, and basically your product, whatever is developing, is being leveraged out on the time adequately, right? Sometimes we get so much bogged down into whether developing or testing that we miss the boat, and by the time then the competitor take over.
Yeah, I have a question. Let's talk a little bit about the people side of this whole thing. So, and John brought it up earlier in the conversation. So when you think about bringing in a third party like a Signity, do you still have an internal QA team? I mean, and how do you, if you do have a team, how do you utilize them to work collaboratively with a third party so it's a non-threatening environment and frankly complementary? Sometimes some people look at it as a cost takeout area. Q&A is absolutely not that. This is about, really making sure you're delivering exceptional solutions to the marketplace. So how do you work with those, the internal and the external?
So it's all about setting the expectation and setting the right mindset early in the cycle, right? So the way I describe is two elements, right? There's a strategic element and there is a tactical element. So current team is doing the tactical element. They're working on the releases or requirements, and there are different programs and work stream going on. They all kind of reacting, working on to get things out of the door, right? Get testing done so we don't delay the release and so on. But at the same time, as I mentioned, right, there's a requirement for the governance, doing things the right way, framework, automation. So the next time you don't spend week doing the testing, if you have automated, you can run it quickly and so on. So that's where the strategic team comes in a picture, where you bring in like somebody like Signity. First of all, you do current land of the lay assessment. Based on that, you define the gaps, and then you come up with some sort of approach that can help them. So earlier, before you strike the engagement between those two, I kind of do the roadshow and then explain that why we're doing it, how it's going to help us. So the team on the ground understand that, they're not there to take over their job. They're there to help them. They're there to help to complement them. So that's about bringing the strategic and tactical aspect together, and then going to the management is the same thing. It's like not adding another vendor. It's more like adding maybe a short-term some sort of expense, but eventually it kind of bring those two teams together and adding more efficiency, right?
So technically, so what I hear you really saying is that someone like a Signity or other providers that are helping you in this space are really just basically an extension of your own enterprise, right? That's
exactly
really what they are.
So when I go and talk to my counterpartner, I'm not saying that, okay, Signity is coming here and do the audit. It's like he's another team member from me who's going to kind of help me do the assessment, current land of the lay, do the analysis, and then from there we'll decide how to fix it, if there are any gaps. If not, how we can help each other, right? So it's like adding what do you call a stepchild type of
no, I hear you. So we're coming up here close to the end of our half hour, believe it or not, but I wanted to ask a question about priorities. That's probably one of the most challenging things that you have to deal with, right? Is how do you prioritize in your business? I mean, it just seems like everything that a pharma company would be doing would be super high priority. And so there's business as usual, And then there's what I call surprises or emergencies or things that pop into play that maybe we didn't think about before when we planned for the year or things like that. So it's probably a constant juggling of priorities at the end of the day, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And so there is what I like to do is I'm kind of approach it like strategic way, right? I kind of do a matrix. In there I do the comparison, start with the cost, budget, time to finish it, how much pain it is, and the most importantly, if we don't fix that problem, or we don't address that, what's the risk and reward, like, so how much money we're going to lose as at the end of the day from the business use case because we didn't do time to market type of a release, right? So like you put all those bunch of points together, and then depending on what comes out to the priority 1, 2, 3, obviously, and then like I just don't decide it myself, right? I do my own homework, my own analysis, and then obviously go to the management. Same time, bring the right side, who is business. They're the one who is kind of facing the market, right? They're the one who's going to have some sort of impact if we don't do, or we do it earlier or late. So review with them, get the agreement, make sure clear transparency and communication is there as well.
Great. Hey,
That's
listen,
great.
we're about to end here, but real quick is, if you had advice, we've got a few hundred enterprises that listen to the show. So if you had advice that you could offer to other people in a role similar to yours at other enterprises, what would that advice be with regards to the process around selecting a testing partner and or utilization of a testing partner?
So, I mean, I mentioned earlier, so there are ways to strike the right balance, whether you are selecting the right vendors or building your own team, right? Don't get bogged down too much into the process-oriented team or process-oriented partners versus all about technology and innovation as well, right? It's like, as I said, between scout and shoulder, you have to strike the right balance. First, decide or ask yourself the question, what is the problem? What is it that you want to achieve? What is the right outcome you want to get? Based on that, then decide who can help you and how they can help you, right? Because everybody talks about automations and tools. There are so many vendors out there and all those. So first, know what you want to do it, and then find out or do some sort of a pilot assessment, ask them some question, or even give some small challenges and see what type of approach they would take. And based on that, then select right vendor.
That's wonderful.
Wow.
Well, thank you so much for being on the show, Dinesh. This has been fantastic.
Went by way
and
too
we really
fast.
appreciate your time.
Thank you. Yeah, and I agree. It went really fast. I appreciate your time, and it was a pleasure having talking to you guys.
Thank you, Dinesh. We really appreciate it.
Take care.
Thanks. Wow, what a great topic. I could have gone on forever on that one. I love it because you don't think about those things, but those are key. Those are critical. Things don't work without quality assurance and testing. They really don't.
Yeah, John, it really is this evolution of different roles and responsibilities in firms. I mean, 10 years ago, people looked at supply chain people as like, yeah, they're the people that have to buy stuff and make, and all of a sudden, supply chain, especially during COVID, it's like they had a seat at the table. Yeah, they left the basement and they're now on the top floor, making big decisions. And I see Q&A very similar as Q&A was an afterthought, and Dinesh talked about that. And now Q&A is no, it's at day zero. Q&A is involved, and I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, no, I think so too. I think he brought some really, really good insight I hadn't thought about, quite frankly. So
what do we got next week? In 2 weeks, John?
No, actually, so it's next week. So we're going to, a little bit unusual. We're going to do back-to-back shows just because of scheduling with some of our guests. So we have a really unique guest that's coming next week. All of our guests are unique, but this one's going to be super unique. We have a guy, his name is Clay Copland, and he is the CEO of the Cordova, Alaska Electric Co-op, as well as the mayor of Cordova, Alaska. And Cordova, Alaska is a small fishing village that's off the coast of Alaska, and it's really interesting. It'll be interesting to hear his insights and some of the challenges that they go through each and every day, being as small as they are and as remote as they are. So we're looking forward to having him next Thursday. And
John, this is, again, just so people know, this won't be about politics. This will actually be about technology and energy and some really cool stuff that they're doing up in Cordova.
Exactly. And basic solving business problems. And when you wear as many hats as Clay Copland does up there, right? It's interesting to see how his perspective on solving problems, given that he's got a corporate side, but he's also, the mayor of the town, right? So anyway, it's going to be
That's pretty cool. That's pretty cool. I'm looking forward to it, John. Until then, listen, enjoy that brisk one day that you had for the fall, and we'll talk to you soon.
You too. Thanks, everybody. Thanks to our listeners.